Hello everyone and welcome back to Send Its Weather channel. Today we're looking at the very latest from the latest models, the GFS, the American model, the GM, the Canadian model, the ECM, the European model, which has just come out as I'm recording this. And of course we'll take a look at the ensembles, have a look at the stratospheric data, which is looking very interesting at the moment. There is potential for a Scandinavian high to develop, however things are very uncertain at the moment, the models are chopping and changing. I've just brought up this, which is not one of the main operational ones, but this is the potential if you get a proper block towards Scandinavia. You can see you've got an established block. This is the 13th of Feb from a random ensemble member I pulled from the GFS. So you've got a proper Scandinavian high with winds in from western Russia. You can see the cold air is doing a very far travel from this around the block, and he's taking this cold air straight into Western Europe from Eastern Europe. The whole of Europe, look at that, is plunged into the freezer with the minus 10 line moving in, the minus 15 taking over the whole country, the minus 10 line taking over the entire country there. That's just the potential of this pattern. Of course, it's probably unlikely to happen, but we'll take a look at the latest because there is scope there for something colder. Now, we'll start with the icon model first, which will take us to 8 days away. So, at the moment, we have high pressure just out, or through tomorrow anyway, we have high pressure just out to our west, which is kind of like a transient ridge. It's pretty cool. Not cold, not cold by any means, but it will feel chilly at the surface. Through the weekend, high pressure builds to our northeast. However, it kind of doesn't come to fruition because this low pressure is too strong in the Atlantic and topples it. So the high pressure kind of topples away. So we get some very mild southwesterly winds. However, we get another build of high pressure with the icon, and that looks like it's setting up a proper easterly wind. Now, what I wanted to point out is that there is not really a chance of something as ridiculous or as remarkable as a beast from the east. It's not likely to verify. I mean, it could, but it's less than 5% chance, I'd say. You can see, if we look on the icon at the very end, for 7th of February, we have some cold air to so it's nothing remarkably cold. But obviously for those sort of areas in Eastern Europe, it isn't too bad. It is actually quite cold, but it's nothing compared to what we saw from the beast from the east. But that was a proper prolonged block, and then it moved back and then it retrogressed towards Greenland, and it covered the whole. It was kind of just a proper northern blocking feature, and it's so rare to see these days, so don't always expect it. This is the GFS then. So again, very similar for the next few days with high pressure building to our east, bringing in a very mild southwesterly wind. Then high pressure begins to pull out or amplify movement towards Scandinavia. It gets towards Scandinavia, but the high pressure builds in a little too much, so we don't actually bring in any cold air. The cold air stays in Eastern Europe, and we kind of just stay in an average pattern. It would be very cold, would be very chilly with possible overnight frost and fog, but we don't bring in a proper easterly wind there. So that is the potential. If you can see heights do build, and we do bring in an easterly, but it doesn't bring it in strongly enough, and kind of it topples away. But one thing I did want to point out is that the Atlantic is quite cold. So at 10th of Feb, so second week of Feb, the cold zonality means that this low, even though it might look quite flat westerly, quite average to slightly above average temperatures, this is actually colder than average. The Atlantic is going very cold for the middle of Feb. So things just because even if the easterly does not come off, which there's still scope for it not to, which is probably a high likelihood. But even if it doesn't come to fruition, there is still a lot of cold air wrapped in the Atlantic, which is quite rare. So that would be cold zonality with the potential for probably more snow. If we get an easterly, it's quite dry because you have heights and it's quite close to the country. So you bring in that wind from the east, but it's quite a dry air mass, unless you get little troughs and features. But that's far too far out to identify. Next, we'll move on to the GM then, and if you're enjoying this video, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate it. We're on the road to 1,100 subscribers, so I greatly appreciate your support, and leave me know of any comments of improvement, criticism, anything like that. We'll move on to the GM then, very similar for the next few days. High pressure builds to our northeast, but kind of topples. There's a resurgence of building to our north, however the Atlantic's slightly too powerful, topples that high, and It's not exactly mild, but you can see that the southwesterlies are waiting in the wings by the end of the run. The blocking's too far to our east. It's quite strong towards Siberia, 1050 millibars, but it's kind of eastern shifted. So all the cold air goes into Eastern Europe and does not make its way to the UK. You can just see it on this chart. -10, -5 isotherms way out to our east. And the big change in track as well from a lot of these is that the low pressure is going to move northwards towards Greenland and Iceland, which is why it's so difficult to model things like this. We'll look at the ECM next, very similar for the next few days. High pressure building through, bringing winds in from the southwest on Monday and Tuesday. Then through Wednesday, heights build, so quite a cold day on Thursday with winds in from the east. Might not look that cold at the with the upper level air, but it would be quite a cold day with winds in from the east. Would feel quite brisk. But again, no easterly with the ECM. But there is some hope, because this model here, the AI model, is the most reliable, and there you go. That's at day 10, has a proper block, of a block being established to our north and east. Quite a strong area of high pressure towards Siberia or northeast Scandinavia with 1045 millibars. That'll take a lot to shift. And winds are in from the east, bringing snow showers into the south and the east. Now, this has the highest reliability of any model, which is quite surprising. Even brings the -10 line into the far southeast there, you can see, around the 10th, 11th of Feb. Obviously, there's a lot of scope for it to change, but that it shows that it's not all over and done with, especially not with the models at the moment. There's too much flip-flopping. At the very end, it starts to bring in some even colder air into Scandinavian areas, and it's beginning to move into Western Europe, so that could make its way over. But that shows the potential. Look at all that blocking to the north. That would take a lot to shift that. With the Atlantic kind of stuck, it's kind of stuck, and that could, if it was trying to encroach from the west, and we've got cold air established over the UK and Western Europe, that could be fun and games for snow and things like that, but it's too far out to say. Now, ones to take a look at next was this, and this is also something of interest, a sudden stratospheric warming. This is the GFS 12Z, and it has appeared recently. You can see this is the polar vortex, and it's split into two lobes of, the polar vortex is split into two lobes. You can see this warming, which extends from Siberia, has displaced the polar vortex into, obviously in the stratosphere, but it's displaced it to Eastern Europe, from its regular spot at the poles, at the North Pole, over the North Pole. And as you can see, there is a split of the PV. Now, this could cause some impacts, but it would start them at the end of February. There's always a 2-week lag time between a stratospheric event happening compared to when it can happen in like 2 weeks' time. So it would be the start of March, which, depending on what you think, is your opinion. But that just shows the potential is there. And I just wanted to highlight it. This can bring the potential for stronger amplified blocking patterns, a southerly tracking jet, and it can cause different things to happen. Doesn't always, but it does heavily increase the chance of colder weather. So it depends on what you like. I see you, Hazel, in the chat. I see you, Hazel. You wouldn't be liking that one. Well, it's so far out, I won't worry about it. But it's something to monitor at the moment. Now, this is the GFS ensembles, the latest suite for London. And if we have a look, you can see that there's a lot of scatter. So you've got, for the next few days, we're going above average with the upper high temperatures. So it's going to be mild, probably milder in the south, but further north might still be a bit chilly. And then the trend is for it to go a little bit below average. There's a lot of scatter. Some runs sinking down to -10, some going to plus like 5. So there's a big spread in solutions. Obviously, if you did get something cold, it could get colder. It's just there's that much uncertainty that it's a bit unsure what's going to happen. Look further north to central locations such as Barnsley, then there's a bit more scope for it to be a bit colder there, with the -5 actually returning there. But again, the runs aren't that cold. You'd expect in the southeast, if we got an easterly, the southeast and the east to be the worst affected because, of course, it's closest to the cold air masses. But not always the case. So yeah, that's just a quick update from me. What's my thoughts? Well, I think it will turn colder. I do. And my prediction was the second week of Feb. I told you to note it down, and there's some interest appearing around the second week of Feb. So keep an eye on. Will say it's very encouraging that AI ECM model is on board. So that's just something to monitor. So I hope you all enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe if you did, and I'll see you all in the next weather video. Bye-bye, everyone.